Across the earthquake zone, the first responders were often those who just showed up first. So many everyday citizens running in to help. A sea of hands in motion, moving water where it's needed.
This is quite an organizational feat here.
I was 5 years old when the last earthquake happened, the big one, and we have been taught and we have been drilling for this.
Mexico City was rocked by a deadly quake in 1985. Yesterday morning, they held a routine earthquake drill to prepare for the next disaster. The drill finishing just hours before the real nightmare began. Another quake hitting on the same day, 32 years later. And now, waves of volunteers mobilizing, coming far and wide, including an urban search and rescue team deploying from L.A., Israel sending 25 engineers.
A number of buildings have collapsed in this neighborhood, and what folks are doing now is ferrying literally water by hand, by human hand, a long chain of humanity here, taking all of this water several blocks this way to a high school where they're going to be giving out that water.
People here know these are the critical hours to find survivors, and so many are now answering the call.
This is Mexico City at its best.
While the toll is heavy, along with hearts, a sense of purpose reigns supreme. Out of one disaster, many at the ready, doing whatever it takes. Ron Mott, NBC News, Mexico City.
In Mexico, the discovery of a group of schoolgirls buried alive has given rescuers fresh hope of finding more survivors from Tuesday's deadly earthquake. Emergency crews worked with their bare hands in almost total silence to free 12-year-old Frida, who told them she was in contact with 5 of her friends. The drama that's unfolded on live television is being seen as emblematic of search and rescue operations throughout the capital. In Mexico City, more than 80 people have been pulled alive from destroyed buildings. At least 230 people are now believed to have died after the shallow 7.1 magnitude quake caused major damage in several states. Although it's too early to assess the damage, initial reports suggest collapses were limited to mostly buildings that predated a stronger, devastating quake in 1985, after which regulations were changed.
On Thursday, the powerful Hurricane Maria caused flooding as it brushed past the Dominican Republic, following its devastating path of destruction through the U.S. territories of Puerto Rico and St. Croix. Maria is the second major hurricane to tear through the Caribbean this month and has already killed at least 17 people and devastated several small islands, including St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Dominica. With sustained winds up to 120 miles per hour, Maria is expected to pass near the Turks and Caicos Islands and the southeastern Bahamas on Thursday night and Friday, according to the U.S. National Hurricane Center.
It's not a matter of if, but when. As Mexico reels from its 7.1 magnitude earthquake, California, from Los Angeles to San Francisco, is anxious and on edge about what so many fear will be the big one, reports NBC.
A small earthquake shook L.A. earlier this week, but a study from the U.S. Geological Survey says the chance of a quake magnitude 8 or larger in the next 30 years has doubled since 2008. Experts say a major quake along the San Andreas Fault in Southern California could kill 1,800 people, injure 53,000, destroy 1,500 buildings, and damage 300,000 more. A serious quake could also cripple the city's water supply and take as long as 6 months to repair.
Who thinks about the pipes in the ground? We don't want to spend money on that. It's out of sight, out of mind.
While nearly $14 billion has been spent on seismic upgrades to transportation infrastructure, including bridges, the city of Los Angeles now requires property owners to retrofit buildings that cannot withstand a strong earthquake.
Do you feel like LA is ready?
LA is getting ready, and is probably far more ready than a lot of other cities. But LA's huge, there's a lot of old structures.
A new preparedness plan has landed on Mayor Eric Garcetti's desk and has not yet been released. And the U.S. House recently approved federal funding for an earthquake early warning system, as California prepares now for a worst-case scenario that may come with no warning at all. Jolene Kent, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. Donald Trump's warning that the U.S. would totally destroy North Korea if it threatened the U.S. and its allies has just drawn a response from Pyongyang. Here's what the North's foreign minister said of President Trump.
If he was thinking about surprising us with dog-barking sounds, he's clearly dreaming.
Mr. Trump called a Kim Jong-un rocket boy. How is your response? How is your response?
I feel sorry for his aides.
The North's repeated missile launches have drawn worldwide condemnation. Now China has warned the crisis is getting more serious by the day, and the world cannot let it spin out of control. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has said he's seeking a military equilibrium with the U.S. For now, Pyongyang is certainly matching Trump's rhetoric.
Catalan separatists have held fresh protests outside Barcelona's High Court. Judges in the city must decide whether to release around a dozen senior officials accused of organising Catalonia's independence referendum. Tension remains high as Madrid attempts to stop the banned poll. We're not afraid, this protester said. We want to vote. We want to have the right to decide. Regardless of what we vote for, we want to vote. It's complicated, this man said. The state is doing everything it can to avoid dialogue. 5-6 years ago, it would have been possible to take this process to the negotiation table, rather than what you're seeing today. Catalonia's economy minister is one of those being held. The region's leader has accused the central government of imposing a de facto state of emergency. In addition to detaining officials, authorities have been seizing voting material. On Wednesday evening, a mass rally against Madrid's attempts to halt the vote saw scuffles between riot police and protesters outside Catalonia's regional government offices.
Two senior UN officials have appealed to the EU and its individual member states to agree to open up a legal channel of migration. A deal between Italy and Libya to shut down the last major corridor to the continent for migrants was recently welcomed by EU countries. Louise Arbour, Special Representative for International Migration, said the appeal was not just to Europe but to all governments.
This is the United Nations. This issue of human mobility and vast numbers of people on the move is not just about Europe. I'm sure that the Global Compact will reflect the preoccupations that people have. The better government, state-to-state cooperation we could put in place, the less we're going to see of this kind of chaotic humanitarian crisis.
Commissioner for European Neighbourhood Policy Johannes Hahn says another alternative to handling the migrant situation is to focus on assisting the countries from where the migrants have travelled.
So the aim must be to give people a possibility, an opportunity to stay where they have been born. And this is, I think, the challenge in particular of the more advanced and more developed countries in the world.
The number of people displaced by conflict and persecution and the rising complexity of international migration has now hit record levels. Issues such as migration, Libya and also the nuclear deal with Iran were discussed during the meeting on Wednesday. Later today, Syria will be high on the agenda for EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini.
Sul dossier siriano. Da New York, Michela Monte per Euronews.
Theresa May caused quite a stir among the British press during her last trip to Italy back in July. On Friday, she visits Florence and she'll no doubt be hoping to make the headlines again. The British Prime Minister is in the historic city in a bid to deliver what Downing Street has described as a major speech on Brexit. The address is being seen as a bid to break the deadlock in divorce talks, which resume in Brussels on Monday. A special cabinet meeting was held on Thursday to brief ministers ahead of the speech to ensure they're clear of the party line. Detail is given next to no details. Sources suggest she'll offer a €20 billion divorce bill aimed directly at the EU's 27 leaders. What is clear, however, is that May has chosen Florence because it's the geographical heart of Europe and a historically powerful trading post. And it's exactly where she wants Britain to be when the Brexit process is over.
The Soviet colonel who famously saved the world from nuclear war has passed away. Stanislav Petrov had been on duty at a Moscow nuclear early warning system in 1983 when it issued an alert that the US had just launched missiles. Petrov told his bosses that the alarm must have been triggered by a system malfunction. Even if something seemed fishy there, he says, "Do you think I was 100% certain about what I should tell the commander? Of course not. There were doubts." The incident only came to light in the 90s after the collapse of the USSR. Petrov received hundreds of letters of recognition from all over Europe, but he never understood why. He said he had just been doing his job. It emerged this week that Stanislav Petrov had died quietly in his apartment near Moscow in May. He was 77.
E termina de momento agora para um espaço comercial, ora no Stop Back e Deporte CBA.